Economic Resiliency Initiative Planning.
Approval of a programming resolution. It's needed as part of a grant application that we've put in through ACOG. We're looking for, I guess, as far as if we are selected, we would have a local match of $3,000. We would look to study the Northeast 23rd Street corridor, basically, for the entirety of city limits, looking to look closely at the land use, streetscapes, and opportunities for beautification. And we'd work with the city of Spencer and Oklahoma County on that project as well.
Matt?
Yes.
Since we share that corridor with Oklahoma County and Spencer, I would assume they're going to kick in an equal $3,000 of the match?
That's not, we don't have an agreement with them to do that. So the study would mostly focus on Midwest City.
So it'll mostly be on our side of the
Yes,
street?
and we have most of the right of way along that way is Midwest City right of way.
And, Spencer just got a grant last year for an improvement project inside Spencer, one of those parks, so they would not be eligible for that.
This isn't a commitment of funds yet. What it is it gives you permission to apply for the grant.
Yes.
And then if the grant is awarded, you would come back to us and then get the permission for the $3,000. Is that accurate?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, it's already, I guess we already have funds budgeted for this project.
Yeah, it's already budgeted, so it probably wouldn't come back, but
Siri is a good program. It allows cities to, they work in conjunction with the OU community development folks, and they come in and do a study and look at all the opportunities that we have available in that corridor, and then come back and give us suggestions on how to move forward. So that's kind of what this study is all about. It's been in place since 1994. Good deal.
Motion to approve.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, motion carries. Second item, Mr. Lyons.
discussion presentation by Freeze and Nichols on the findings of the study of the city sanitary sewer system and lift station infrastructure. Mr. Streets is going to start us off.
Honorable Mayor and Council, City Manager, tonight is the culmination of actually many, many months and several years of effort to bring before you a planning document that will help us make informed decisions about our sewer system, our sewer collection system, which we're also calling the Wastewater Master Plan. As you recall, not too long ago in our distant past, we had a moratorium on building on the east side of town, and at the council's recommendation and discretion, decided to expand the scope of what we had originally planned to only focus on the east side of town, to include the entire city, to make decisions, to help us make decisions about where we need to invest our money and the areas that are obviously in need of reinvestment, recapitalization. The engineer that we had on staff, or that we had on the hook at the time, Freeze and Nichols, was willing to go ahead and accept that project. They have delivered that project. What you got a chance to see is the executive summary, and tonight you'll see the presentation, which I think gives a great summary of what we think is important for our citizens, our customers, and obviously the decision makers to consider when we make budget decisions in the future. I hope that you will ask questions. I'd invite you, in fact, to ask questions. Freeze and Nichols has been a great partner throughout this entire process. They've brought a wonderful staff here. We met Friday, in fact, with Tim, so he could see the rough draft and we could actually work through it, the final draft, and work through it. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Carrie Evenson for her effort. She, all along, has helped bird dog and work with Freeze and Nichols to get them the data they needed, to sore thumb whatever they presented, and ultimately to work with them so that you've got the final product to review tonight. And I'm grateful for her efforts and the many, many long hours of time that she spent reviewing the materials. So with that, I'd like to invite her to come forward and talk a little bit about what you're going to get a chance to see before we bring Freeze and Nichols up to present.
Paul, I have just one quick question for you. I know that we're going to get the full story here in a little bit. I have read it, and it's not particularly good news. Do you agree with this summary? Is it fair for me to ask you if you personally agree with this engineering summary and the
Mark,
results?
I would not stand here and present it to council if I didn't believe in the contents of the executive summary.
All right,
What I will
thank
tell you is, I want to rephrase what you said. It doesn't look like good news, or it looks like it's bad news. I want to tell you that I think it's great, because up until now, we were guessing about what needed to be repaired and how much it might cost us. Now we are informed. We have the information and the tools we need to make good decisions, not only for the city, but the citizens and the people that are affected by those decisions. So I think it's a good thing, because we haven't had one before.
Fair enough.
All right. I just want to say thank you all for giving us the opportunity to have this wastewater master plan created. It gives us a lot of insight into our system that we didn't have before, so that we can better plan for needed improvements across the city as a whole. I also want to acknowledge a couple of folks sitting in the back, and they're sitting in the way back so you don't notice them, but Justin Madison, our line maintenance supervisor, and Tom Vogt, our wastewater chief operator. Both of them were instrumental to helping get this plan completed. Without them providing information on maintenance, work orders, and things that providing the data that they see every day as part of their job. Without having them provide that information to us, this plan wouldn't be as well informed as it is. So with that, I want to turn it over to Cullen Carlson, who is with Friesen Nichols. With him, he's got Clay Herndon and Jennifer Wassinger. And Cullen is going to go through our presentation. If you have questions, he can answer. And then anything that you need my particular expertise on, I'll step in and answer as well. Cullen?
Thank you, Carrie. I too want to echo, sorry, I know everybody, it's a love fest. I too want to echo the thanks for Carrie, for Paul, for Tom, for Justin. We couldn't have done this without them. We want to come alongside and partner and help, but these guys know the system, so we're just there to assist and give feedback and build a model and provide information. So thank you guys so much for all your help on this, and I look forward to giving you all a presentation tonight. So did some intros already. My name's Cullen Carlson. I am in our water and wastewater master planning group. So what I do is master planning. That's what I do all the time. Done this for a lot of different cities. So I'm the lead project manager, and then Clay, our technical lead. As we get into this, this wasn't just a capacity check where we use the model. This was a look at the whole system from a risk, condition, and criticality standpoint as well. So Clay helped me out quite a bit with that. So please do feel free to ask questions along the way. I am an engineer. This is what I do every day. If I need to explain something more in depth, please don't hesitate to stop me. So quick agenda. I'm going to give an overview. Then walk through the master plan itself, the process that we went through, talk about the recommendations, and then if there's any final questions at the end, go through those. So for a quick overview, a collection system made up of a lot of different components, but we broke it down to 3 different components. There is the water resource recovery facility, your WRF. There is the wastewater lines. And then there are the lift stations. So anywhere where we can't gravity, we have to lift it back up so we can gravity. We wanted to point out for this study tonight specifically, we are focusing on the wastewater lines and the lift stations. There's a separate ongoing project that is looking at the WRF and what improvements are needed there. So tonight we're focusing specifically outside of the fence on the collection system. So why is this important? This plan provides a lot of great information. What it does, first and foremost, is it lets us take a 10,000-foot view, right? A lot of times with wastewater, out of sight, out of mind, we get to utilize a lot of information, a lot of good data, put it into our model, and then it helps us identify, given the conditions that we know within the system, where might you have system deficiencies, and how can we address those before we might see it come out of the ground. right? So we can use our model to help us identify those deficiencies. It helps us to maintain the regulatory compliance. Again, we don't want any overflows, so we need to identify those, phase in some improvements, try to get ahead of those before something happens, and get those addressed. It supports sustainable growth. So we did the East Side Sewer Study. We know that there's a lot of growth going on over there, so it helped us to address how do we serve that growth with what different projects that are needed and in what phase. It protects the public health and the environment, right? We don't want anything coming out of the ground. We don't want anything backing up into anybody's houses, so this helps us identify those issues. So it gives, guides strategic investment, right? There, you read it, Mr. Thompson. There's a lot of big numbers on there, but that's, how do we phase that in? How do we take that off in chunks? How do we get ahead of those? It increases operational efficiency. So one of the things we did was we took a lot of look at all of the lift stations in the system. And so we, while we were out there in the field, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, we noted maybe some inefficiencies, maybe some things that needed to be improved. We made some, recommendations. It just helps to better run the system. And then it promotes transparency and accountability. So we have a plan now that lists out all the projects that are needed. And then there's the accountability for that. So how do we approve those projects? So just wanted to take just a quick overview of the whole process. So as Paul mentioned, we got started with the East Side Sewer Study back in August of 2022. We worked through, we looked at all the growth and the development. We specifically focused on capacity. We did look at some lift stations that were identified during that, but we got that whole process wrapped up in January of 2024. And we were already having those discussions of how do we expand this from just a capacity study on the East Side sewer system to the whole collection system and taking a comprehensive look from the standpoint of risk and capacity. So phase 2 kicked off in January of last year. We started out with a bunch of field work. So one of the things that we had to do was a lot of flow monitoring and a lot of manhole surveys. That was all data that was needed for our model. So we worked through that and developed all the different components, the capacity for the whole system, the risk-based assessment, and then we got everything wrapped up in the final report submitted, and we're here today to present the final. So.
The previous slide where it says system build, I guess you were looking at how the infrastructure was built initially. Is that what?
Sorry. The model build. Yes, so that's our hydraulic model that we build of the system. It's a computer representation of your wastewater collection system. And so we built that originally as part of the East Side Sewer Study. We expanded it to be the whole collection system. And I've got some cool slides that show how that operates and then show some of the results of that. So I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. Okay, so stepping into the wastewater master plan, this is a high-level overview of the different steps within the master plan. I'm going to go through each of these a little bit more specifically, but it kind of steps at the beginning, the data collection and review, where we sat down with staff. We got a lot of historical information. Where do we have work orders in the past? What was the historical flow data to the WRF, all of that information. We did our temporary flow monitoring. And we did a lot of different projections, did our manhole surveys, did our system analysis, and then moved into that risk assessment. And I'll get into these a little bit more. So this was just a high-level overview. So the first step in the process was to perform flow monitoring. So with the flow monitoring effort, we had a sub-consultant go out into the field, and they installed 18 flow meters and 4 rain gauges across the system. So all of this phase 2 stuff kind of builds on what we started with on the East Side Sewer study. So this flow monitoring kind of focused specifically on the rest of the system, but we still had a flow meter over there to gauge, how are the flows progressing throughout the system. So we install the flow meters. They get down into the pipe, and they put a band, and they got a sensor, and they leave them out there for 60 days. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to capture what does it look like on an average day when there's no rain, and then what happens when it rains, what kind of responses do we get in the system. So a brand new tidied up system, if done correctly, there's no infiltration or inflow. Infiltration and inflow is just a part of every system that we run into. And so what we're looking for is what are those responses so that when we calibrate our model, we have an idea of what kind of peak flows that we're seeing under different conditions. So we performed flow monitoring for 60 days in the spring of 2024 at 18 locations. We had 4 rain gauges to help us track the rainfall. We got a lot of great data. We got multiple rain events. I think there was, maybe 6 or 7 events of varying degrees. Some small with very little response, some a little bit bigger where we got some good responses, and then we were able to expand that to do our analysis. Then we performed manhole inspections at 300 manholes. So the purpose of doing these manhole inspections is it helped us gather a lot of great data for this master planning effort. So for one, it helped us build the flow lines within the pipes in the system. So the capacity of your sewer line is very dependent on the size of the pipe and then also the slope of the pipe. The higher the slope, the more capacity that you have. So doing these measurements and gathering all this information helped us to feed into the model, which also helped to enhance your GIS system, which is great to know where are my pipes, what is the connectivity of those pipes, and what is the flow line. It also gave us an idea of the condition of the system. So as we were going out there looking at every manhole, we were tracking what is the condition of these manholes. Some of them are older, some of them you can see some different information, and so that kind of fed also into our risk-based assessment that we did. Then, as we were doing the flow monitoring and collecting all the data in the field, we started developing the population projections. So again, this builds off of the East Side Sewer study where we had a lot of great information where we worked with the community development team. They provided a lot of information on which developments are identified, how many units, what is the population count going to be, or we developed a population count based off of the number of units. We also coordinated with the comprehensive planning team. So in October of 2024, the comprehensive plan kicked off, and we have been working alongside the comprehensive planning team to look at what is going to be the future build out of your system. How many people is that going to be? Because that serves into the next slide when we talk about the wastewater flows. But how many people are we going to have in the system? And then what are the phases of those? So we look at 5, 10-year, and then the kind of 20-year build out of the system and try and phase in the projects when they're necessary. So.
Are you saying that this project also looking at future growth of the city?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So we look at where are the people at now whenever we do our existing system analysis, and then we take the information that we gathered from the community development team as well as the comprehensive planning team, and we project that out into the system, where they're going to be, when they're going to be there, and then what is the ultimate size of the pipe. We don't want to have to go in and replace a pipe, in 10 years because we made it one size too small, so we're looking at the build out of the system. Yes, ma'am.
Very good.
Yes, ma'am. So the population projections are very important. We as engineers get to work right alongside of our urban planners because the population is the basis for the future flows. So we took a look at the historical flow data at the WRF as well as the flow monitoring data to help us project the flows out into the future. So this chart right here is showing the projected flows through the 2050 planning period that will make it to the WRF, the Water Resource Recovery Facility. We've coordinated a lot with the team, the Garver team that is working on the facility master plan for there. We shared this information with them. This is the average day projection for the WRF. A lot of this also feeds into the collection system. So as the population grows, the higher the impact on the system. As it rains and there's bigger peak flows, how does that impact the system? So,
I think you guys are also handling the comprehensive plan,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
So is part of what you're examining over there also being contributed to into these predictions?
We're all working together. Us, the comprehensive planning team, the water master planning team, we shared a lot of this information with them. I think we kind of got started first, and we had already kind of done these parcel level projections, and so we were just coordinating with everybody, working with the comprehensive planning team to make sure, with what they're doing, does our projections make sense, and then sharing that with the other teams as well to make sure we're all planning for the same number. Yes, ma'am. So here's our wastewater model development. This being the engineer in me. I love to talk about this part, but I won't go too much into it unless you have any questions. So we build a model of the system. This is every pipe within your system is represented inside of here. We got all the flow lines. We got the all the lift stations in there. This is a little screenshot from the model. So for each of the pipes in the system, we can build a profile, and it tells us what is the capacity of that line. Whenever we start running the model, and we have an example of this later, it puts the hydraulic grade line or the water level within the pipe to show us how is the system conveying the flow. Obviously, if it's doing its job, it's staying within the pipe. Even if it's coming out of the pipe, it's doing its job as long as it's not coming out of the ground. So, excuse me. So this model is dynamic. It's a great tool. It lets us look at the whole system. So we built the model, then we need to calibrate the model. So what we did was we put those flow meters in the ground. That's represented by the green. That's the flow over multiple days. On the left, it's kind of dry weather without any rain. You can see it's really kind of a neat thing to look at wastewater flow. Maybe only me thinks that, but it's a repeatable pattern. You can tell a lot of things by looking in there. You know, is it residential? Is it non-residential? What does it look like? So the green is the flow meter data. And what we're doing inside of the model is turning knobs. You know, is our population correct? Is our per capita information correct? All the things that are, you know, the generation of the wastewater flow. So we're trying to match this up to the flow monitoring data, because what we're trying to do is build confidence in staff that our model represents what's going on in the system. So we do that for dry weather first, and then we move on to wet weather. And so you'll see here, whenever it rained, there's the response in the system. Excuse me. And so we're turning a different set of knobs within that to represent the I&I, the leakiness factors within the system. So building confidence, we've set up our model to where it represents what's going on in the system. And now we're going to use it to do the analysis. So we identified a design storm that helps us to normalize what we want to design for within the system. It's a decent size event, but it's not too big of an event. You don't want to build your lines too big, so it's a storm with a 20% return frequency. So in a year, 20% chance, want to make sure that we have enough capacity. So we looked at the existing and the future system. We applied the rainfall on top of the existing where the people are now, and in the future where the people are going to be, looked at the responses and identified any of those deficiencies that we were talking about. And so on here, it's kind of small, a little bit difficult to see, but we've circled some specific areas. Some of these areas were identified. Again, this is building off of the first, the East Side Sewer Study. So we've identified some areas where there is some surcharging within the system. So this identifies those different areas. These are the areas that we want to target when we start doing our future planning. Where do we need bigger infrastructure to be able to serve, to convey this flow without having any issues?
I have a question about that slide.
Yes, sir.
Most of the main water lines are shown in red. That means they exceed capacity currently.
Yep.
The one I'm looking at runs right through the middle of my ward, the west side of town. There has been modest growth on the west side of town over the last 20 years. Does that mean that that is likely that sewer line has exceeded capacity for 20 years?
It kind of depends on the leakiness factors within the system, right? So we did the flow monitoring in this year. And so if the leakiness has over time, trying to repair different leaks within the system, it could just over time, and it happens in every sewer system, just got to a point where it's now starting to exceed capacity. I don't have the historical data to be able to look at that, but that would be my suspicion, is that just as the system ages, it gets a little bit leakier, and we've just kind of hit that design life.
What is the impact on a water system when they exceed capacity? What happens bad? Does it just exceed capacity and we go on about our business, or is there ultimately going to be something bad that happens?
It depends on what's going on in the system, right? So if it exceeds the capacity, the sewer system is designed to, your manholes are generally somewhere in the range of 8 to 10 feet deep, right? So if it exceeds the capacity of the pipe, it may go outside of the top of the pipe, but you're not seeing an overflow. You may, because this is a 20% storm, if you get a bigger storm, if you're getting something like 100-year storm, which your system, you're not trying to size your sewer system for that, right? But if you get a bigger storm, you may get, some areas where it's getting closer and closer to the rim of that. So it really, again, it depends on the intensity of the storm, how it hits the system, and then how under capacity is that line.
Okay, ultimately, somebody's going to have to assign priority to the big number that's getting ready to come up in 2 slides, I think. And that's what I'm thinking ahead to, is exactly how do we know what to do first?
Right.
And where, are those circles where we start first? Is that basically what you're saying? Those 4 spots are the biggest trouble spots?
These are, yes, sir. These are those areas kind of focused. But again, we have multiple different phases of the model within the scenario. We have multiple different scenarios within the model, where we look at the existing, the 5-year, the 10-year, and the build out. And we took a stab using the information from a capacity standpoint, when were those hydraulically necessary, as well as, I'm about to get into it, the risk-based assessment to look at what is the risk of each of these pipes.
Right.
So all that information kind of fed into one big analysis scenario where we're trying to place the priority on them, and that's why we've got different numbers within.
I won't interrupt again. Thank you.
No, you're great. Those are great
I'd
questions.
like to piggyback on that.
Yes, ma'am.
So do you prioritize where you start, or is that a collaboration between both?
It's a collaboration, but we kind of took a first cut at that to look at, again, I'm about to walk through the risk component. So we have the capacity, and where we under capacity, we obviously don't want any overflows, but we help to prioritize those projects based off of the desktop analysis of the condition and the criticality.
Because I'm thinking you probably started in the older part of the city, right?
We looked at the whole system, and we looked at we assigned each pipe a score. So I'll get in, okay.
Am I jumping ahead? That's okay.
I forgot that we added a slide to help. So Mr. Thompson, this is what we're identifying within the system is, this is a results from our model. So the blue line on top of those pipes, where you see I've circled it, it's getting pretty close to that manhole rim. The brown is supposed to represent ground, and those little cylinders, those are the manholes. So this is a low-lying manhole, and it's surcharging, but it's not projected to overflow. What we're really trying to do is prevent overflows when we go through and we prioritize each of these projects. So, the big thing, we don't want any overflows. So those, if it's under capacity, we want to target those. But then we also use the prioritization from the risk-based assessment to help us to kind of align and prioritize each of those within that whole capacity check as well. Yes, ma'am. So that's a great segue into the other component of this. So we've done capacity. We use the model to check the capacity. Then we performed a risk assessment, a risk-based assessment of the whole system. And so risk is a function of criticality. So just think of that as the consequence of a failure, right? So from a criticality standpoint, the bigger the pipe, the more flow that might be impacted or make it outside. If it's a smaller 8-inch line, it's still critical, but maybe not as critical as that big 24-inch line. And then we looked at the condition. which is the likelihood of asset failure. So one thing to point out before we get into this, because I know it's going to come up, this was a desktop level assessment. So this is looking at the maintenance history, how many work orders in the different areas, what is the age of the pipe, and what is the pipe material. So when we start talking about the asset failure, if it grades high, if you've read through the executive summary, if there's a lot of red on there, that's just areas to target for when we start talking about the annual improvement program. So I don't want to scare anybody when we start looking at some numbers. This is a desktop analysis. We haven't physically looked with CCTV at any of these lines. This is just the 10,000-foot view to help us prioritize where to take a look before we start doing replacement. So these were just some maps that we pulled together. Staff provided us a lot of great information on historical work order data, and we were able to go in and geocode this and kind of identify the different areas. These are historical locations where mainline repairs were performed. This kind of gives us an idea of, are there any hot spots where there's issues? We also have the mainline blockages. A blockage doesn't necessarily mean it's under capacity. This could be attributed to fog, fats, oils, grease. This could be roots, different things. Go and clean those out. Can restore the capacity of the line. But these were other work orders. Sewer backups, again, some of these may be based off of peak wet weather, I&I in the system, but some of them may be due to fog or roots in the system. Clean them up and you fix those areas.
It appears that Rita was correct. The concentration of the blue dots follow the age of the neighborhoods pretty correspondingly. Don't get very many failures out east. They're almost all in the older parts of town. So, all right, thank you.
Yes, sir. And I would point out, this is pretty typical of any wastewater system. The older parts of town, they just need more love because it's older infrastructure. And so when we did our risk-based assessment and when we made recommendations for annual improvements, it is to target some of the older parts of the system, whereas we've already kind of looked through the east side sewer study to figure out where the capacity is needed, and then we prioritize those together to figure that out.
And unfortunately, we had failed to do proper maintenance for decades, so some of our older pipes probably need more attention.
I want to clarify, there was maintenance being done, but pipes reach a certain point in their lifespan. You can't do much, and there were sometimes things were underfunded. So for years, unfortunately, there were things that we would like to have been able to do, but because there wasn't sufficient operational funding or capital improvement money, it was difficult to do, say, everything. And shortage of manpower, we were operating at 30% vacancy rate for almost 6 years in line maintenance, which makes it pretty tough to do the job. Not making excuses, we did prioritize and do the maintenance where we could, but aging infrastructure has a lot to do with it, and obviously density, where we have issues, tree roots. We're being able to do some of these things now with the support from the city manager's office and council. We have funded some of those programs, put some things in place so Justin can do the things that he's been tasked to do to help community manage.
And Mr. Street, because I know this was a big conversation in regards, and the failure was really city council and leadership. I believe they didn't give you the adequate funding in previous years as this came up. It's not so much maintenance, but rather maybe some of these pipes need to be replaced?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You'll see that.
Just one more, where they've been performing root treatment in this system, where there are lots of roots growing into the lines. Again, these are some older areas in the neighborhood where roots are growing in. So here's just a map that takes a look at the age of the pipes within the system. This kind of points out, again, we like to look at these sometimes because it helps to show how your city's grown. It's kind of a neat way to see the older areas of pipe or where those are in the system. So we identified the pipe age And then just wanted to point out the unknowns. There are some unknown portions within here. Some of those areas were the oldest parts of the system, and there just weren't any design records that were available to be able to pull that information. So just wanted to point that out. Pipe material, similar. Some of the materials that were installed kind of in the older part of the system, those are areas where we're targeting replacement or renewal of different lines, specifically focused on some of the smaller concrete pipes as well as the clay tile pipes. So for the risk-based assessment, we took the composite of all of the condition scores, the age, material, and work orders, and we assigned a condition to the pipe. So this is where I was talking about, don't be turned off by the red. These are just kind of the older parts of the system that when we start talking about an annual improvement program, this is where we want to target. This doesn't mean that they're about to fail. This just means that they're older parts of the system that maybe aren't the material that or maybe are the material that we're trying to replace. So when we start doing inspection program, starting in these areas, this will help to go take a look before you just start replacing line. What is the condition, the actual condition of the pipe? So from a criticality standpoint, again, the bigger the pipe in the system, a lot of your biggest pipes are within the creeks. That's just how gravity works. So the biggest pipes are within the creeks. They serve the most people. So from a criticality standpoint, you often see those bigger pipes. Those are the ones that have the highest criticality in the system. So risk, the function of condition and criticality, you multiply those together and you get the total risk of the system. And so this is kind of the basis for that prioritization process. So we know where we have capacity issues. Now we have a risk score that has been assigned to each pipe within the system, and we can kind of take the composite of all of those projects and prioritize them as they are needed. So in addition to a look at the gravity and force mains within the system, we did do condition assessments at 15 of the lift stations. Centrillium wasn't online at the time, so we did inspections of all 15 lift stations. We took a similar process where we went out with staff, went out with Tom. We got a composite score on different parameters at each lift station to give it a weighted score. Again, this is helping us with the priority or the prioritization of each of these projects. And while we were out there, we identified some general site recommendations. You know, is there a valve that's not turning that needs some valve maintenance? Is there a pump missing that we need to install a pump? Just making notes, and you can kind of see that in some of our write-up there while we were out there.
I'm assuming we have more than 15 lift stations? That's the total number?
We have 16 total.
Okay.
Centrillium lift station that you mentioned
Okay.
is a brand new lift station.
Okay.
It was under construction when they did the assessment,
Gotcha.
so 15 across.
I just wanted to see if we were analyzing a limited set or if it was total.
This is
Perfect.
all the lift stations. Yes, ma'am. So here's just some pictures from when we were out there. Again, our staff working right alongside your staff to get a full understanding of the station. So while we're out there, we're making notes, making inspections. Tom's got all the history of each of these because he's been maintaining them. And so, you know, where have there been some issues in the past, making notes on that. So we took a look at the pumps and motors, the electrical, the instrumentation, the structure, the piping and valves, the mechanical, and then the site itself. You know, is the fencing good? Is the access okay? So did that at each of the stations, worked together on that. Make sure I didn't skip one. And so similar to kind of the color scheme that you see on the map of the collection system lines, it was a little bit easier to show this on here. So you have the condition along the top, and then you have the criticality on the side. So this allowed us to build a matrix and identify where do we focus our first efforts. And so as part of the East Side Sewer Study, we had identified some improvements at Edgewood. There's some rehabilitation going on there. This go round, Shady Nook and Compa kind of lifted to the top. Shady Nook had some different improvements that were needed, but also it ranked in the capacity component. And so there has been, I believe, some funding approved to do some rehabilitation, and then in the future we have an expansion of that. So,
Mr. Carlson?
yes, sir.
You're an engineer.
Yes, sir.
Could you go back 3 slides to the pump station, the picture of the pump station?
These?
What is the relative difference? You got 3 pumps of different sizes. You got flow coming in from 3 pipes. Why don't you have one pipe, one pump, much larger, to handle the entire flow rather than 3 separate plumbing systems? Wouldn't it be more effective to have one larger pump with the combined flow from the 3 pipes coming into it to lift it all at once?
So I can give you a good answer, but I'm going to let Clay describe it way better than me.
Thank you. Yeah, Clay Herndon here, office out of Oklahoma City. I lead the water wastewater group. So lift stations is kind of where he does master planning. Lift stations is where I stay and function on a daily basis. So when it comes to lift stations, the state requires you to have full redundancy in your pump station. So if you do one big pump, that means you're gonna have to have a second big pump. And it's more effective to operate the full range of flows, because you don't always have peak flows. A lot of times you have just daily minimal flows, and you need to be able to handle the full envelope of flows that come in. So smaller pumps oftentimes make
I
more sense.
understand now. Thank you.
I do have a question. That there's one thing missing out of your risk assessment matrix, that when we did a field trip out to these lift stations, one thing that was glaringly obvious to us was the lack of security. Fencing, cameras, lighting, things of that nature. Obviously, if some nefarious character wanted to take us offline, it would be extremely easy. So, is that going to work into the overall assessment suggestions? I mean, the suggestions would be obvious by cameras and fencing and alarms and things of that nature, but how does that work into your overall assessment?
Yeah, so
especially in today's world.
Right. Yes, sir. So part of that is in that site assessment. So on our sheets, that was one of the things that we were noting while we were out there. Is there proper fencing? Is the fencing in good condition? And so some of those recommendations from the general recommendation standpoint would be to repair, fencing in there. I don't know if we had any recommendations for cameras. That's kind of a citywide discussion. Some of that goes into some of the, I'm sure y'all have gotten to do some of the American Water Infrastructure Act stuff, but I'll let Carrie handle that.
Yeah, so another piece to this, and this is where this connection between the collection system and the WRF comes into play. As part of the WRF master plan, we're also looking at security at the lift stations. We're looking at not just physical security, but we're looking at cybersecurity as well, because those lift stations have to talk to the plant so that we know when pumps are running, when they're not running, things like that. So we're looking at that and evaluating those processes as part of that WRF master plan. And as we are developing these improvement projects, like at Edgewood and Hiawassee, those are the things that we're incorporating as we deal with pump sizes and electrical and things like that. So we're taking all of that into account.
If I could elaborate one more piece to kill a dead horse. It is a function in this matrix. It's just a smaller function, right? We're focusing on making sure the structure is not going to collapse. The pumps are going to meet the capacity that they need to. Electrical system's not going to fail or has the necessary redundancy. It is a function. Let's say it's a smaller function of the overall picture.
Okay, so now for the big shebang. So we took all the information from the capacity study where we used the model. We utilize the information from the risk-based assessment to help us prioritize the different projects throughout. We put all of the different projects in buckets. So we have a 0 to 2 year bucket, we have a 2 to 5 year bucket, a 5 to 10 year, and then a 10 to 20 year bucket. So those 0 to 2 projects are meant to kind of address some of those those existing deficiencies, right? So Mr. Thompson, what you were talking about, over there in your ward, that line, that's a 0 to 2 year bucket that we want to address that, get ahead of that capacity, and make sure that we don't have any issues moving forward under big rain events. So quite a few colors on here, a little bit colorful, but the intent was to help to differentiate between when we were proposing all of these different projects. So this is a map of the projects. I can talk about any of those on the map, but I'm sure we kind of want to move into some numbers. So if you want me to come back, just let me know. So from a recommendation standpoint, we've kind of talked about it, we've alluded to it. So one thing is to implement the annual rehabilitation program. This is to do lift station improvements. We have these broken out in your executive summary. So do the lift station improvements, and we've kind of identified each year which lift stations to target with that kind of bucket of money. The pipeline inspection program, we've recommended to hire or to purchase another CCTV truck and hire another crew, because the intent is all those red lines to be able to go and inspect those. One of the big things is, yes, it shows up red, but if they go inspect it, it might turn green or blue because the pipe was installed great and it's working great, so you don't need to do anything there. And then the pipe rehabilitation and replacement program. So as you do the inspection and as you identify those older pipes or the ones that have the cracks in them, the leaks, a program to go and be rehabilitating or replacing those pipes as you go. So implement the annual rehabilitation program and then complete the capacity improvement program. So we have a table in the full document. It has cut sheets for all of those that identify more specifics within each of these dollars. So there's dollars behind this and the cut sheets. But this lists out all of the projects kind of in that 0 to 2, 2 to 5, and then on the next slides we got the 5 to 10 and 10 to 20. So in that 0 to 2, we included some of those projects that were already identified as part of the East Side Sewer Study. There's been some funding that has been approved for these projects. So a lot of the design or construction has already been funded for some of these projects. So identify those in here, and then we've come up with cost estimates for each of the projects as well.
I have a question on, this is probably for one of you two or even Tim. On the 0 to 2, the R1, how will that work? There's $7 million in that pot.
So it's actually 2 years, so it's 0 to 2 years, that's about $3.5 million a year and essentially in the improvement program, which is rehabilitation, recapitalization, spend money on things that we need in order to maintain the system. So that is a fixed cost on an annual basis, annualized basis. It gives us the ability to do the work that needs to be done from a maintenance standpoint.
Any pipe bursting in that? Or so if we have an area of the city that we're concerned about, that would be where that would happen, correct?
We would use the camera again, essentially, to be able to camera the areas that we have concerns about, which is, again, they recommend that we have a crew right now. We have one that's being split between 3 different departments. So it gives us the ability to let them focus specifically on the collection system, to assess and evaluate whether that is part of that cost is annualized and is in that number that they feel like would be a good number for us to shoot for on an annual basis to help manage the maintenance and rehabilitation of the system.
So just because, like on the 0 to 2, there's Dorchester and Timber Ridge Boulevard, just in Shady Nook, just because they're not listed on there, that does not mean that, and I don't want to pick on the street or anything, but just because that's not identified does not mean it won't be looked at, correct?
That's correct. So what you see is an itemized list of the larger projects that we found in the system. We can mark criticality and obviously costs associated with it, any risk-based assessment. The $3.5 million that we're talking about, that is something that's actually used to cover a number of projects across the city. So I personally, for instance, we had to do a repair 2 years ago to a line that was under the pond out on the east side of town. Those are the kinds of things that we need to fund on an annual basis that aren't reflected in specific projects that are part of that line. So yes, all over town, not specifically in an area. These projects are much larger. As a general rule, we'll have to do engineering and look for funding in a number of other ways rather than specifically looking at utility rates.
Because if you remember when they first started, it was just, we were concentrating on the east side. And then as a result of our Miss E's Ward 1, it expanded because rightfully so, she had concerns about the area where she represents in the original mile. And there are some concerns about, and as Mark has brought up, about the west side too. So that's where those would fall into. Is that correct? Okay.
Can I just follow up on that for clarity? 3.5 million, I would, in my mind, I guess the way I'm processing it is money that really should have annually been budgeted in addition to what you've been getting in order to maintain lines properly and have adequate staffing. Fair?
You know, let me answer that. Carrie or I, Carrie is really the expert here. I'm just going to pretend to be one. So, on the money side, we have about $2.7 million that we get through the Strothman Fund or through sewer construction. Now, 1.7 and 966, so that's about 2.7 million. And we also have the operating account, right? The 191 operating account, or is it 192? 192. Water's 191, sewer 192. So we have that as an operating account that pays for Justin and his people and trucks and all the equipment and the staff. So the 3.5 million, we're not collecting 3.5 million, obviously. We're not that far off, but what worries us just a little bit is that we have the wastewater treatment plant that we know we have issues at. And so the sewer construction money, which is the 1.7 million, is kind of tied over there until we get all that worked out. But we're going to have to work through the numbers. I'm just going to dive in and then I'll let you clean up. I was supposed to reverse with her, but anyway. So I saw this report at 9 a.m. Friday morning. So I have not had any time to start talking budgets and how we're going to fiscally deal with all these issues. We know we have priorities and we need to work on those. And obviously, Carrie and Paul have been working on them. You see all the design funding up there. I mean, that's engineering and they're working on this stuff now. And we have certain monies out there that we've had loans out on, or we've used ARPA, or we've scraped money together and we've started. We know Edgewood is number one. We're in the middle of fixing Edgewood. It's numero uno.
Before Dr. Evenson, you respond to that. So based on what you said, again, I'm processing it in order to have a healthy budget for wastewater moving into the future. Would it be accurate to say that we need to see an annual 3.5 million increase to that budget? And based on what you said, my assumption is that was not worked in to our most current budget.
It is not worked into our most current budget. 3.5 million is what they're recommending that we put in infrastructure. That's pipe bursting, that's replacing things, that's working on lift stations. I mean, we've identified some of this. We're not gonna be able to just snap our fingers and say, here's $3.5 million, or nor are we gonna say, gosh, there's 171 million if you turn the next page, which is really scary.
Honestly, I mean, based on, I was fearful that we were looking at billions and billions of dollars that we just literally didn't have. So 3.5, in order to adequately fund your department that does critical infrastructure work in our city so that we don't have million project slapped in our face as a result of a crisis, like, sounds reasonable, practical, and safe, to be honest. But so we're looking at 3.5 million in addition to be added to your budget, but would
No.
it be correct? No.
Not 3.5.
Okay.
We're getting 2.7 now.
Okay.
So 3.5 would be another 800,000. We just have the bogey of dealing with the wastewater treatment plant. But if you take that bogey out of there, it is not as big a number as you think.
Oh, gotcha.
And in some of this, we're gonna have to deal with loans. You know, since Carrie's been here, we've been working with the Oklahoma Water Resources Board, and we've gotten some, I really like the, what do they call them, that you don't have to pay them back?
The principal forgiveness.
The loan forgiveness, that's
Yes.
my favorite word in all time. But anyway, we're doing all that we can, but we'll have to look at borrowing money for some of these big projects. As you look at 0 to 2, 2 to 5, we're gonna have to borrow some money, but we'll have to pay that back, and that's part of this whole financial process, whether it's through that 3.5 million or through some of the money from the operating. But at the end of the day, I haven't had a full 8-hour, 9-hour day of looking at the actual numbers, but I don't think we're in, I don't want to sound some alarm that we're going to have to go find a $3.5 million rate increase, because Jeff is back there writing all this down. And that's not really accurate. I mean.
It's on Facebook already.
I know, it's already on Facebook.
I'm kidding.
But, we're going to have to work through the numbers. You're going to have to give us just a little time to come up with the plan, and Carrie's already she's a lot further along than I am. Why don't you talk and get me out of hot water?
Okay.
Well, I want to throw a wrench in all this too.
Okay.
Before you get started, Carrie. In the budgetary process, you guys have to sit down and look at your annual overall cost of keeping the doors open. And the cost of the CIP on this is going to be in additional to your operational costs. So you're going to have to prioritize these projects. And it's going to be our job to ensure that you've got the money to prioritize those projects. So I'm sure you're going to come back to the council and say, these are critical. This is a great study. I mean,
It's a good study.
I can't thank you enough for providing this information, because it does give us a roadmap, but we need to continue to press forward on this roadmap and not underfund your department, and continue to make progress on the improvements that we need to make. So with that being said, go ahead, Carrie.
Fine.
All right. So I'll say, this gives us a great place, like you said, this gives us a great place to start. We've already started, because of the great work that Friesen Nichols did with the East Side Sewer Study. They got us started on some of the capacity needs, right? So when you're looking at, to Mr. Thompson's point, when you're looking at the city, what you're seeing is kind of a tale of two cities, if you will, right? On the east side, we have capacity needs because we know we're growing and our infrastructure needs to be sized appropriately. On the west side of town, our system is aging, right? That clay pipe that they talked about, when it gets old, it gets brittle and it cracks, and I think Justin has said, if you sneeze on it, it breaks. So those are things that have to be repaired. We know they have to be repaired. We're getting to that point where they've reached their life. Concrete pipe, you may not have ever heard of that in a sewer application. Old application, but it also doesn't work well with the sewer gases and some of the other things that it encounters, so it deteriorates over time. So those are all things that we have to work into our phase plan. So that annual dollar amount, what we really wanted to do with that is to remind everyone that this capital improvement program, if you will, is not just capacity, right? Capacity is one component, but this rehabilitation and replacement is the partner piece to it, so that our collection system improves and provides the level of service to our customers that we need it to over the next 20 years. So when we're looking at that dollar figure for annual wastewater, what Friesen Nichols looked at as we went through this process was, in order to replace those older pipes that we know need to be replaced, what would it take? What percentage of the system would we have to replace every year in order to keep our pipes within their useful life of 50 years, right? And that's what they've done. I think it's about 2% every year that we would need to replace in order to, by the time we got to 50 years, when none of us are here, but at least the next one, the next group of folks says they set us up really well. You know, now it's time to begin that process again and renew our system. So yes, we need that annual figure, but along the way, we're gonna have to figure out how to phase in and process these larger capacity issues. And that's where some of the funding that we talked about through OWRB and other places will come into play. That'll allow us to get to some of those larger projects completed. And we've already started to look at how do we, given our existing budget, how do we phase those projects in? And then at what point, and I know this is always the dreaded discussion, at what point would we have to come back and talk to you about rates? As we talked about, when we talked about the water rate increase last time, we talked about both in operation and maintenance, the needs there, as well as the capital. And we made big strides in water capital. We're gonna need to make some of those same strides in sewer capital, but we may be able to, with some of the things that we've already done, we may be able to stretch that out a few years before that becomes a critical case to come back to the council with and discuss.
Carrie, I apologize for my coughing fit earlier. I don't know what that was, but the only problem with stretching it out is that, as we've seen, these are inflationary times. What's $171 million estimated cost now, by the time we get to the point where we're actually laying pipe, will be more than that, correct? I think
Yes.
we can assume that costs are not going to go down. So any delays that we put into this are going to be, they're going to be needed to be accompanied by corresponding increases in the estimated cost.
Yeah, these are 2025 numbers.
So the sooner the better, I think, is from a financial point of view. But the problem is that we have already taxed our citizens heavily with their water bills, and they're just now feeling that pain. So it's not going to be well received when we say, oh, yeah, we've got another $171 million in wastewater issues with a wastewater treatment system and freshwater system and our stormwater systems that have yet to be heard from, which are going to add to this considerably. That's a big burden over
It is.
the next few years, and yet the pipes are starting to break in the roads, as we've all seen recently. So I guess I would just say, you know, everybody needs to be patient and buckle up,
Yeah.
but don't expect your water bill to go down. That's the bad news.
I want to point out, I think, obviously, Mark, you've raised some important points, and obviously Carrie and Tim have done a great job helping communicate some context that's really important for decision-making in the future. The good news for you is that on the water rate side, when we made those decisions and evaluated what those are, I know it was a bitter pill for everybody on the council to swallow, and it's not easy for our ratepayers. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. We won't have all of those capital costs covered, but we're pretty close, closer than what we were with the wastewater. The hard part is every time you touch one of those rates, you're kind of looking at that snapshot of where you are today and what those needs might look like. And even though we've got some of the best staff, in my opinion, in the whole state, maybe the U.S., you can only see what you can see. And given your experience and context, it's sometimes a challenge. These wastewater rates got touched a handful of years ago, but it was before we had any kind of a master plan. The good news is, and I think this is important to point out, the city management team and the folks at Public Works said over 5 years ago, actually more along the lines of 7, 8 years ago, you know what we need to do? We need a master plan. We've got to have a master plan so that we can do the appropriate planning and put the money aside to do the work that we need to do. I think it's also important that when we talk about how we're going to spend money, that's also not something you can't just throw a bunch of money at it at one time, because then when it does fail, you have a significant cost again. So one of the things, Freeze recommended a 5% replacement on an annual basis, which is, or repair and maintenance. I think it's important for us to realize that there are going to be things that we definitely need to prioritize. The good news is, along the way, we'll find some things that aren't as broken or damaged or destroyed because they're unknown. And as we find those things, and we can maybe offset, say, you know what, we're going to do this 10 years from now. We're going to do this right now because we know there are problems we're going to address. Good news is we've got some information at our disposal, and we're making some decisions. Council has made some decisions to support that effort and move forward. And I think it's important, even though you say, well, we didn't do a good job, the fact of the matter is, you know what you know. And sometimes it's challenging if you don't have the information. Had we not decided 7 years ago to put money away for the master plan costs, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight. So I think it's important for everybody to understand that there's some benefits to having worked the process the way we did, and for us, moving forward, we do have some hard work. We're gonna have to roll up our sleeves. Tim's already pointed out, I will tell you that he is somebody that loves to dig into the numbers, and he's not one of those guys that's gonna gloss over. He has his red pen handy, and we will absolutely look at every number, not just in the capital plan, but the operational budget, to make sure that we're making responsible decisions on behalf of those customers and constituents. So realize this is also just the tip of the iceberg. What a lot of people what they think is, oh, we've done the master plan, all the hard work's done. The hard work is really yet to be done, and that is, how do we fund, how do we manage those programs and those policies to help us be successful? How do we put the right people in the right seats on the bus for us to be successful? How do we give you the information you need to help make those decisions so that we can be successful? So obviously, kudos. I know that we're going to have more discussion. Obviously, we're looking at a 20-year window. And you're right, that number, I really kind of thought that number might be bigger, but it's still a huge number for somebody like myself. So be patient, but I'm excited because we're at least at a point, as we pointed out at the very beginning, we're in a much better place right now than we've ever been in terms of planning and managing for the sewer system.
And I'll just add on to that too. It's not we've done this and now we're done, right? It's we've got to start the implementation process. That's going to be the most challenging part. And then we're going to have to look at this again in 5 years, right? That's the recommendation for all master plans, is that every 5 years you review what you've been able to accomplish, what you haven't been able to accomplish, because things happen, right? We don't know where we're going to be in 5 years. We don't know where the city is going to be. So we want to be able to keep this as a living document, get as many of the projects that are the high priority immediate needs done as possible, and then reevaluate in 5 years. Shuffle that deck again and see what the next 5 years of priority is.
So that just brought up a question. When was the previous master study done on sewer?
You're looking at it.
This is
Never.
first.
This is it. This is the very first one.
Yes, and I think there was a lot of frustration from myself and some of my colleagues when we were hit with the east side, and whoa, nobody had any idea. And there was a commitment made that now that we know, we are going to have some standard practices in place, so future bodies and staff are never confronted with that. And I think Dr. Evenson had a great suggestion that as a matter of practice, we need to have an evaluation process every 5 years to have a better idea of what our needs are.
That sounds like a suggestion for a motion.
Yes, but let me, and I'm open to that motion for sure. The other thing is I want to applaud Ward 7 Councilman back there, because he has been proactively saying that we need to adequately fund other departments in our city. And so you were right, sir. And lastly, Dr.
Must
Evenson.
be talking to Ward 7.
Yeah. Dr. Evenson, the only thing that I ask staff and leadership is that it is obvious that we are going to have to come up with this funding to meet the urgent needs of our core infrastructure for the years to come. That we don't wait like we had in the years previous. If we have to do rate increases, to do them 50 cents at a time instead of waiting and doing it $7, $8, $10 at a time. I think people will be much more understanding with that. And I understand we just had a fee increase, but I think the good, hardworking people of this city, if they understand the situation, are willing to give a little bit at a time within the means that they can afford, than for us to give them a pass and delay and hit them at once with a huge inflation. So just want to encourage
I
you
want
guys to
to
consider that.
shift back to Freeze and Nichols for a minute here. Is there, from a planning standpoint, future, are there any ordinances or any equipment adaptations that we need to be looking at to force developers, like backflow preventers and things of that nature, that we mandate into the construction? We've already established a connection fee for future development on the east side because of the lift station. So is there any other planning items that you would suggest that we look at or adapt to prevent, you know, the number one lawyer and the number two business coming after us again?
Well, I'm not sure of any ordinance to address that, but I just want to reiterate, you know, on the rehab program to identify different things, you know, checking this in 5 years, right? If you're going out and you're renewing the system, maybe the project, like you said, there hasn't been any growth over the last 20 years. Does that reduce the I&I? So then the next time that we do this in 5 years, if we haven't built that line already, does that reduce the I&I that's getting into the system by, you know, doing slip lining or doing pipe bursting? That in and of itself could eliminate projects, being proactive and doing the inspections and doing the replacement there. But as far as ordinances, you know, just making sure that, you know, doing the inspections after, you know, lines are installed, making sure that they're being installed correctly, just to make sure that they're not installing something. I think a lot of times we'll do inspections after installation, just to confirm that it was installed correctly. You don't have a pipe that's already, bent down, or, you know, cracking as soon as it was installed. So, you know, that's one way to do it, is just do some inspection, require the post-inspection CCTV to make sure that it was installed correctly. But I can't think of any other.
I want to point out, Mayor, that one of the things that we have tried to beef up and do a better job with is our planning practices. So Matt, the planner over there, our engineering practices and our inspection practices. There are things that obviously our ordinance review, we go through that on a regular basis to make sure we're meeting regulatory burden.
Sure.
But in the end, for us to make sure that we're doing a better job, the best job we can do with those inspections, as Colin pointed out, the engineering, as far as when we get plans in, making sure that those are appropriate. There are times you guys have been a part of some of those really difficult discussions about, hey, we're not going to let this, we're not going to pass this, we're not going to rubber stamp it. And part of that is because we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the right reasons, protecting future customers. Because if we let something go through and we've not done a good job with the inspection, the engineering, and the planning, well, then shame on us. We always talk about sins of our fathers. I'm tired of that phrase. I want to get to the point where we rejoice in the good decision-making, that we're doing what we can do to protect those customers, and not only existing customers, but obviously those that are going to have to deal with the decisions we make today.
And I do personally want to thank you and your firm. You came in, we brought you in here a couple of years ago on one project, then it blew up, but I'm glad it did. You
Well, it was good for their firm.
You guys adjusted fire. You took it and you ate the elephant one bite at a time. And we appreciate it, because this does give us a document. And most of us aren't going to be here, but it's something that the city management can push forward. Just like we did the fire and police studies, we mandated that whatever it came back, that we adapt and we move forward with it. And that would be the area of your motion, that we adapt this and we move forward.
Well,
Mr. Mayor,
That's just, everybody relax. That's just in theory.
One point also, Mayor, and based off of what you said and Sarah said, you know, we tell each other, and we've been told all along, that if our city attorney tells us to do something, and we do it, we're okay, that's the way to go. We're not covered, but we rely on his expertise to tell us whether we should jump or not jump. Well, we're relying on you guys right now to tell us to jump or not jump. And for us to ignore this, I think
Oh,
would be a sin for sure.
Just wear your bow tie all the time.
If you come back and you're asking for money, you'll know he's asking.
He's got a
He
bow
wears a
tie,
bow
not a
tie.
regular tie.
Well-
Mayor, I would,
Ever wears one, we got problems.
Mayor, I'd like to recognize Paul and Carrie for the hard work they've done on
Absolutely.
this and their staff. So,
And the one other good thing is that, Matt, the planners, people have been involved in this because we need them knowing what you guys are doing because you guys are aware that there hasn't necessarily been a close relationship for a while. And you guys, I appreciate it very much because that's the only way it's going to work is if you guys talk to each other instead of pointing fingers. And I appreciate all of y'all's work.
There's one other thing, we talk about old timers and the sins of the fathers, but I would like to say this. Those fathers who put those pipes in the ground 70 years ago, they're with a 50-year lifespan and we're still using them. So they didn't do such a terrible job.
Right.
It's just up to us to take the ball and run with it now. And, quit, being quite so harsh on the people that came before us.
Well, just,
This is just informational, right?
just a closing statement. We would like to thank you all for taking the chance on us and giving us the opportunity. We've loved working alongside a staff. They've been so supportive and so helpful. This is a key relationship for us. We love working alongside of you, and we just appreciate this opportunity, Your Honor.
Thank you, we appreciate you. Everybody did a great job, and now we just gotta bite the bullet, and Tim needs to write the freaking check.
Do you get one of those?
I want-
Is it one of those big ones?
yeah. I just want the check to clear the bank.
Okay, okay.
That's all.
That a lot more cities are going to be doing studies like this in the future? Because I'm assuming we're not the only city in the state that runs into these or are facing these issues.
Definitely. I've been doing this for 18 years. It's what my group does is just doing these types of studies. And, to go back, we were talking about the water and the wastewater. For a long time, everybody was just focusing. When I first started out, everybody was just focusing on water. We need to have water. We need to have water. Well, then there was a catch-up, right? Everybody had been neglecting the sewer system for so long, and the EPA kind of started cracking down. And so then we started, increasing the amount of wastewater studies that we were doing. And so we're doing these all over the place, trying to help do exactly what we did here, is identify the projects, come up with a plan, and then come alongside the city to help with, what can we do, to help you move this forward. Jennifer likes to help with funding. We have all different other things that we're doing. But yes, sir, these studies are ongoing all the time. And as Carrie mentioned, they're being updated on a 5-year basis. It's that whole plan, do, check, act is, we've got the plan. Let's go in and start executing the plan. Let's check how that plan's going. Are we eliminating some of that I&I? Can we eliminate some projects? And so it's just an ongoing process, and it kind of matures as you go, right? We've got the first study now, and so next time as we dive in, is there, some more focus doing, some different types of inspection or something like that.
And
Yes, sir.
eliminating the I&I out in your ward really helped us to be able to do away with the moratorium that we had to put in place until we had a better feel on these projects. So that's really important, and that was really helpful. I think Avalon Lakes or wherever that was at. Yeah, Justin.
Do you feel like some of the things that we've done out in the east has helped reach what we're trying to accomplish? Paul?
Yes, sir.
So I was going to say, as you notice that list, I'm glad he left this slide up. So if you look at that slide and you look at the list of things that are up on that slide, you see how design funded or grant funded on almost all of the things that's in the 0 to 2 year. That's because of the emphasis and the effort made in the East Side Sewer Study. The challenge now, Rick, is not, we don't have all of those funded. We've got the design done. Now we're actually trying to get money to help get those projects funded. I will tell you that had it not been for that effort, Edgewood Lift Station, and you can ask Tom Vogt, who's been here a long time, how many times that thing has failed or caused problems where we've just not been able, I mean, nobody has been willing to kind of tackle that juggernaut. And if it hadn't been for that effort and support, I don't know that we'd be where we are. And we're expecting new pumps literally any day this month that we can actually get those things done. We've got a bypass built, which is why it was ever built without a bypass, I don't know. So to your point, had it not been for that effort, we would not be where we are today. And looking, yeah, we were able to lift the moratorium. We made some good decisions. We've still got some more things that we're gonna have to fund and work toward that.
And you know, the administration's changed, the federal government changes on what their priorities are, and it's been clean water. We've seen a lot of grant money for clean water, and we have grabbed as much of that as we can. Gray water, we haven't seen a whole lot of money put in gray water in some time. I don't know how long it's been, Jennifer, that you've seen an emphasis on gray water, but I can't.
It's been a good long while.
Yeah, so hopefully the federal government will make a focus on gray water at some point, and then we'll certainly be looking for those grants to help with this $171 million.
Do they insure these pipes?
Well, we do insure the sewer backups, and that's a whole nother story, as we know.
Any more questions or comments for both guys? Again, thank you guys very much.
Yes, sir. Sir.
We now move into the new business public discussion. Does anybody have anything to bring before the council on this particular item? Hearing or seeing none, we are hereby adjourned.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for allowing us to present tonight. It's always fun for me to talk about sewer. I'm glad that you share the affinity for
Hold
sewer.
on. Apparently, we missed something really important, and honestly, I can't believe I've fallen down on the job, because as most of you know, I love to sing a very special song on people's special days. Apparently, it is Jennifer Wassinger's birthday. So if everybody be willing to do this on the count of 3, I'd love to serenade her. Stand up, Jennifer. Stand up, Jennifer. We're going to, and YouTube is on. Jennifer, if you don't mind, we would like to sing you happy birthday on 3. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jennifer. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you all.
Yes, the study, I guess we probably should have pointed that out. What you got was the executive summary and the PowerPoint. The actual study is over 440 pages, it's over 440 pages. That study will be made available. We'll have it electronically. It'll be available on the website at some point. The hard part is it's a huge document, so it's not easy to just transfer. But we will absolutely make that study available. And if you have questions about this, I welcome any. If for instance, you see something, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know that I understand that, or what does that mean? Please feel free to call us and ask us, Carrie or myself. And if we don't have the answer, we'll get you the answer, obviously. And I think you've got an executive session, don't you?
Discussion, consideration, possible action, 1, entering into executive session is allowed under 25 OS 307B3 to confer on matters pertaining to purchase or appraisal of real property, and 2, In open session, authorizing the general manager, administrator to take action as appropriate based on the discussion in executive session concerning Project Malcolm.
Chair, entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Motion.
All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair so moved. Now, executive session.
No, thank you. Nope.
Can I use the restroom?